Hi, welcome everyone. Can you hear me?
No.
No? Okay. Welcome everyone. Can you hear me, Chuck? Okay. My name's Elizabeth Wilson, and I'm the Vice President of the Historical Society. I'm here to share a little bit of information about our annual business meeting that's coming up on November 13th. And we are proposing some changes to our Constitution. So this is considered the first reading of those changes, and documents with that information that's proposed to change are right on the back shelf for you to take a look at if you're part of our membership on your way out. In addition, because this is very brief what I'm saying today, we are going to have a public forum in 2 weeks right here on October 23rd at 7 p.m. open to the public for discussion and any questions that anyone might have about the proposed changes to the Constitution. And all are welcome to attend, so we hope to see you there. And also the annual meeting, like I said, is also on a Wednesday in November in about a month. It's November 13th at the Granville Inn. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Chuck to introduce our speaker.
Thank you all for coming this evening. Tonight's program, as all our programs, are supported with the help of a generous donation from former Denison University President Dale T. Noble and his wife Tina. And before we begin, I want to introduce and name members of our programs committee. Nanette Macy Junes, who is chair, sitting in the back there. Sam Schneid, up front here. Gil Miller apparently could not make it, and Kathy Dollard, our newest member, over there. So, our speaker tonight, Sarah Hinkelman, is the historic site manager of the Newark Earthworks and Flint Ridge Ancient Quarries and Nature Preserve on behalf of the Ohio History Connection. The Ohio History Connection, excuse me, is a statewide nonprofit organization whose mission is to spark discovery of Ohio's stories by embracing the present, sharing the past, and transforming the future. She joined the OHC in 2022 after having spent 3 years at Hopewell Cultural National Historical Park, where she served as a park guide. It was there that she found her passion with sharing the story of pre-contact American Indians in Ohio and the connection their descendants have to the landscape. She has her master's in anthropology from Ohio State University and is a certified interpretive guide through the National Association of Interpretation. Sarah lives here in Licking County, where with her husband, 2 small boys, a cat, and a dog. So tonight, Sarah will highlight the impact of World Heritage inscription on the Newark Earthworks in the last year and how this designation will continue to shape the future of the site. She will also discuss future programming, events, and changes to the Newark Earthworks and how the site can serve and support the local communities surrounding the site.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Chuck. Not sure where to put this. Does this work?
No.
Thank you.
Just for the recording.
Oh, it's just for the recording?
Yeah.
So it's not supposed to, okay. Got it. Cool. Huh? Yeah. Yeah. So you guys can hear me all the way in the back? Cool. All right. So yes, my name is Sarah Hinkelman. Thank you so much for having me. I have the honor and privilege of sharing the story of the Newark Earthworks and all Hopewell ceremonial earthworks with everyone who come and visit me, or not visit me and ask me what I do for a living, because I will tell them how amazing these sites are. And I'm very happy that you've joined me today so I can do just that. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the Newark Earthworks. How many of you have ever been there before? Amazing. I love that. I'm so happy that y'all know what I'm talking about.
That saves me a little bit of time. I'm still going to give you a little bit of background just in case you need a refresher if it's been a while since you've come and visited. But this is the entirety of the Newark Earthwork complex. This map was drawn in 1848. Well, actually a little bit earlier than that by Charles Whittlesey, but it was published in 1848 in a book entitled Ancient Monuments of the Mississippi Valley, which was written by Ephraim Squire and Edwin Davis. This document became the first publication of the Smithsonian Institution. So that national institution we've got in Washington, D.C., their publications started right here in Ohio with these Hopewell ceremonial earthworks. But this map was actually based on many maps that preceded it, beginning in the early 1800s. The earliest documented one, and Jeff will correct me if I'm wrong, is 1820 by Caleb Atwater. So even though this was drawn in 1848, it's built upon previous iterations. And much of this portion of the earthworks, the Cherry Valley ellipse, which is that half oval in the corner there, the large part of the right square, and much of those parallel walls connecting the octagon were largely destroyed by this point. The city of Newark was basically built over the Newark earthworks. It spanned 4.5 square miles. The Ohio Erie Canal, the excavation to build that really important transportation route, cut straight through the Cherry Valley ellipse and a portion of the square. The Central Ohio Railroad soon followed that up, largely destroying that portion of the site. But these maps are incredible, incredible resources. Archaeologists still use them to this day to learn more about the earthwork sites. So, what is an earthwork? You might be familiar with what they look like, but what is their ultimate function? It often gets confused that earthworks and mounds are purely for burial purposes. A lot of people come to me saying, oh, there's burials in the Great Circle. That large central mound, that's a burial location. That is not accurate. The Eagle Mound is actually a commemorative mound. It's marking the location of where a very large structure once stood. The Great Circle, the Octagon, other sites like Hopeton were places where people were coming together to gather. Fundamentally, Hopewell ceremonial earthworks are places of gathering. They're places where people were coming together to celebrate, whether that be in relationship to death, the transition from this world on to the next. Some of them are mortuary sites like Mound City or Sipe or Hopewell Mound Group. But many of them have no burials associated with them. We think of them more like churches, temples, cathedrals, and mosques, places where celebrations are occurring. People are able to connect with one another as well as higher powers in the universe even. We'll talk a little bit about how these earthworks are built in conjunction with the cyclical nature of the sun and the moon. A little bit of background about the Hopewell cultural period, because this is just one tiny blip in the long history of human habitation here in Ohio. People have literally been in Licking County for over 12,000 years. When mastodon, those giant megafauna at the end of the Ice Age, were walking around, there were people here in Licking County hunting them. One of the most popular mastodon sites, an excavation of a mastodon skeleton, actually happened at Burning Tree Golf Course in Licking County. It was one of the most complete mastodon skeletons ever recovered. And on that skeleton were butcher marks, which means that people were here hunting that mastodon. Mound building, earthwork building, really began at the tail end of what we call the Archaic period, which begins about 8,000 BCE. It really comes into its own around the Adena cultural period, which begins about 800 BCE. And Adena mounds are a little bit different than Hopewell earthworks in that they're more conical shaped. So rather than being these huge geometric enclosures like we saw with the Newark earthworks, they kind of look like ice cream cones if you round out the top and turn it upside down. We have many Adena earthworks. Even here in Licking County, one of the most popular ones, I think, well, actually one of my favorites is in Fairmount Cemetery, right here in Licking County. It's built right in the cemetery, right next to the church. It's a beautiful example of Adena mound right here in Licking County, less than half an hour away from where we are right now. But earthwork building and American Indian culture really kind of explodes almost or fluoresces, I guess is a better term, around the Hopewell cultural period, which begins about 100 BCE or 100 CE, depending on which archaeologist you ask. Fun thing about archaeology and dates is that they're a little bit more fluid than we think they are. There's a lot of gray area and overlap between cultural periods. So even though we have these dates attached to things, that date might change in about 10 years or so when new technology and understanding of things comes along. But back to the Hopewell cultural period, this period was really a fluorescence of art, architecture, mathematics. And it wasn't just here in what is now Ohio that this movement took place. It was really a continental wide movement of people from all over North America. And we know that because people were bringing what we call exotic materials with them, materials not local to this region. Things like shark teeth from the Atlantic Ocean, giant whelk shells from the Gulf of Mexico, copper from the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, mica from the Blue Ridge Mountain region, and my personal favorite is actually obsidian. Jeff, you're exempt from this question because I know you know the answer. Who knows how obsidian is formed? Yeah. Yes, it is. It is indeed lava cooling very fast. So, in order to find obsidian, where do you have to go? Well, you have to go west, but what are you looking for when you go west? You're looking for a volcano. Okay, another cop quiz. Who knows where the closest volcano is? Pacific Northwest, a little bit closer. A little bit closer. It's close though. Yes, Yellowstone. And we know that the obsidian we found here in Ohio comes from Yellowstone. The chemical fingerprints, the obsidian here with these Hopewell ceremonial earthworks and the obsidian from Yellowstone match perfectly. My friends, that's over 1,800 miles away. And we're talking 2,000 years ago. They didn't have planes. They didn't have trains or cars. These American Indians, these indigenous people were traveling by foot. They were traveling by waterways. The fact that they were coming here was something incredibly special. Something special was going on right here. We'd like to think of these places as these Hopewell ceremonial earthworks as places of pilgrimage. This was the equivalent of Jerusalem or Mecca to American Indians 2,000 years ago, right here where we are today. Ohio, or the land that we now call Ohio, has the largest concentration of earthworks and mounds in the whole entire world. And what's even more amazing about this cultural period is we don't have any evidence that they had a hierarchical structure. There was no chiefdom systems. There was no president or one person in charge. This was an act of devotion. People were coming together willingly, without coercion, to be a part of what was going on here, to participate in building these earthworks. That's something really special. We can learn a lot from these indigenous people in terms of cooperation. So this period of time, if if somebody asked me if you could take a time machine, which era would you go back to? I'd say the Hopewell cultural period because it would be something so special to see what was going on here. Um, and I think that's truly something incredible. As I mentioned, there's a lot of earthworks here, a lot of mounds. We have the largest concentration of earthworks and mounds in the whole entire world right here in our state. Um, and I like to make a little joke, but it's not really a joke. You know how our motto, Ohio's motto, is like the heart of it all? We've literally been the heart of it all for over 2,000 years. This was the place to be. Most of these earthworks and mounds are concentrated in the Scioto River Valley in what is today Ross County, the Chillicothe region. There's a dozen earthworks just in that small area, but that's one of very, very many. This map here isn't the best. This is William C. Mills' Archaeological Atlas of Ohio. It was published in 1914. If you can spot all those little red dots, or the clouds of red if you're all the way in the back and can't make out the dots, um, those are all earthworks and mounds right here in Ohio. At one point in time, there were over 10,000 of them, over 100 earthwork complexes. Really, this was the place to be. And if you think about Ohio and the nature of Ohio, it does make a little bit of sense. Um, I remember growing up in northeastern Ohio, a lot of my classmates wanted to get out of the state. They said, "There's nothing here." I think they're wrong. Ohio really has it all because thinking back, even 2,000 years ago, we've got amazing resources, natural resources. We've got some beautiful state parks, and the topography, the natural resources, the soil, the fact that we have half the state glaciated and half the other half not glaciated, it creates these wonderful edge environments which promote biological diversity. This place has always been a really wonderful place to be. I mean, I wouldn't leave Ohio now if you paid me to. Well, depends on the dollar amount, but um, no, I truly love it here, and the fact that I get to tell the story of this place and the people who have lived in this place is something truly incredible. Um, like I said, honor and a privilege. So, a little bit about the agency or the organization that employed me. I started at the Newark Earthworks in 2022. As Chuck mentioned, I was a park guide, which is park ranger adjacent at Hopewell Culture National Historical Park. I was basically an intern there. I was getting my master's degree and they paid me, and I got to tell the story of these amazing sites. My background is in archaeology. I've done a lot of Midwest archaeology. Um, and I love excavation. I love lab work. You could give me a box of projectile points and stone tools, and I'd be absolutely happy for about a week. Um, but I found that really telling the story of the people who created those artifacts, those objects, who lived at these sites was a lot more fun than just sorting lithic flakes. Much as I love it, this was a lot more fun. So I was working down at Hopewell Culture National Historical Park, and I met my current boss, Jen Altman. I actually applied for an education position at Serpent Mound. Can you imagine? No, I can't either. But sure enough, 2 years later, a little bit down the line, the Newark Earthworks site manager position opened up, and the rest is history. Speaking of history, that's our business. The Ohio Historical and Archaeological Society has actually been around since 1885. Uh, we're now known as the Ohio History Connection, and our mission, as Chuck read at the beginning, is to spark discovery of Ohio stories by embracing the present preserving the past and transforming the future. And I think that the Newark Earthworks is a great encapsulation of that mission. Um, well, the way that we're funded is we are ultimately a 501c3. We're a nonprofit organization. That's often confused. A lot of people think of us as the state. We are not. We do satisfy some requirements that the state usually uh, fulfills. So, for instance, the Ohio History Connection houses the State Historic Preservation Office. We also house the Archaeological Depository for the state of Ohio. So we get some funding for those uh, services that we provide. We also have over 50 historic sites in our site system. Many of those are state historic sites. So we get some funding, general operation funds to fulfill the requirements of upkeeping and preserving those historical sites. We're also eligible for capital funds, which are big, large projects, like, say, your museum's HVAC system totally goes kaput. Capital funds will help you restore that. Or if you're opening a new historic site, capital funds might help with that too. But our big main center is located in Columbus. If you've ever driven State Route 71, seen that big concrete square building, it's brutal. Get it? It's brutal as architecture. Huh? That's our building. That's our main center, but we're really present throughout the state of Ohio. If there's something in history that you're interested in, whether that be air and space or Civil War, Revolutionary War, we've got a site for you. So that's a little bit about what we do. Many of our sites, I think over a quarter of them, if I'm counting correctly, are American Indian sites. Like I said, Ohio has a deep history of indigenous habitation here. And two of those sites are actually right here in Licking County, the Newark Earthworks and Flint Ridge Ancient Quarries and Nature Preserve. I won't talk much about Flint Ridge, but if you've never been there and you like to hike, would highly recommend. It's beautiful. But the Newark Earthworks, we have two main components of the site that are perfectly preserved today. The octagon, 50-acre perfect octagon, and the observatory circle. And then we have the Great Circle. This is an aerial view taken by Timothy Black. I have to say, he's like one of the best earthwork photographers I've ever met. But this is a Great Circle in winter. 30 acres right there. And just recently, well, about a year now, that year went real quick, these sites were inscribed on the UNESCO World Heritage List. You guys familiar with UNESCO? Yeah? Raise your hand if you heard of it before. I see some hands down though. Okay, so UNESCO is an international wide organization. Over 21 different countries are part of UNESCO. It stands for the United Nations Education, Scientific, and Cultural Organization. And one of their duties is to preserve historic sites, World Heritage sites, that encapsulate something incredibly unique about what it means to be human. Every one of the World Heritage sites, and there's about, well, I haven't got my updated number, but about a year ago, it was 1,199 World Heritage sites. They're probably up to like 1,200 now. There's 1,200 sites throughout the world, all over the world. And if you think about it, like 1,200, it's not that much. It's actually a kind of cool, exclusive little club. And each of these sites are nominated based on 10 criteria. I can't name them all right off the top of my head, but we, meaning the Hopewell Ceremonial Earthworks, put our nomination forth based on two of those criteria. 1, masterpieces of human creative genius. That's criteria 1. And then criteria 3, outstanding testimony to the accomplishments of a culture or civilization. Those are the criteria that we were nominated for. There are actually 8 earthwork sites that are part of the Hopewell Ceremonial Earthworks. We're a serial nomination. It's not just 1, but 8. And we are the 25th World Heritage Site in the United States. 25th. Again, we've got 50 states. We're a pretty big country. 25, not a lot. It's a pretty big deal that we've received this inscription. And many of my colleagues and my friends, Jeff Gale being one of them, have worked over 20 years to make this a possibility. This is a culmination of people's careers, and it's just the beginning. And that's kind of what I want to talk to you guys about today. What are we doing? Where are we going from here? But first, let's talk about these criteria. So why are these masterpieces of human creative genius? Well, one of the reasons is because these earthwork sites have incredibly precise geometry. The American Indians, the indigenous people who built these earthworks and planned them, were truly mathematicians. They were engineers. We're talking perfect circles, perfect squares, and octagons. How many of you have ever tried to draw an octagon freehand? How'd that go for you? I'm guessing not well with the chuckles. Yeah, and you probably tried to draw it on an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, right? The American Indians who built these sites 2,000 years ago were able to build a perfect octagon that encloses 50 acres of land. And the measurements, the diameters of the circles, the areas of the square are passed across time and space. We see 20-acre circles like the observatory circle here at Newark that perfectly is identical to the circles at Hopeton Earthworks in Chillicothe, over 60 miles away. That replication of the geometry across time and space is something special. And these were created by human hands. They didn't have backhoes, they didn't have excavators. They didn't have metal shovels and hoes and things like that. They were building these earthworks with simple tools. Woven baskets, mussel shell hoes, bone hoes, wooden digging sticks. The Newark Earthworks, that whole entire earthwork complex that I showed you, we estimate that it took about 7 million cubic feet of earth to build that earthwork complex. You boil that down into baskets, cubic feet, about 21 million. This was a huge, huge endeavor. Here's a little bit about the geometry of the Newark Earthworks in particular. As I mentioned, the octagon is 50 acres. The circle attached, about 20 acres. The square, even though it doesn't look perfect in this image, I promise you it's pretty darn close to perfect. It's 20 acres and the circle is 30. You take the area of the square, 20 acres, matches perfectly to the area of the circle. If you draw an imaginary box inside of the octagon connecting those vertices, area is identical to that of the great circle. The diameter of the observatory circle is 1,054 feet, which is 6 times the distance between the middle of the octagon, the middle of the square, and 6 times the distance between the middle of the circle and the middle of the observatory circle. So they had an amazing grasp of mathematics. There was a standard unit of measurement. It's hard to deny that with this precision, with this accuracy. I got a question today from one of my visitors. Okay, so what was that unit of measurement? Really wonderful question. Wish I knew the answer to. I think many archaeologists wish they knew the answer to that question. We knew that there was one. Hard to deny this without the existence of one. But a little bit about the preservation, elements of preservation here in Ohio. So anything organic, whether that be cloth, whether that be wood, um, any living thing that was once alive that has since decayed. Ohio has some of the hottest and humid, well, not the hottest, but a lot of humidity during the summer, right? It gets really sticky. Moisture and preservation does not go together. So those organic materials will decay faster. Ohio also has some of the most acidic soils. It eats away at things. So if their measurement system was preserved with fibers, with wood, written on leather, or equivalent to like papyrus or paper, it's long gone. So we can't say that there wasn't a written record, that there wasn't an existence of some sort of measuring system. We just do not have it remaining today. And that's one of the, I guess you call them mysteries, but one of the missing puzzle pieces that we have to the past here in the Midwest. There's some pieces of the puzzle, some missing parts of the story that we'll never have. But we know that this was sacred geometry. These measurement systems, the circles, the squares, the octagons, they were passed across time and space. As I mentioned, we've got the 20-acre circle here at the octagon, equivalent to the 20-acre square at Hopeton, over 60 miles away from another. The other super amazing thing that these earthworks have, many of them, that relate to masterpieces of human creative genius are the connections with the cyclical nature of the universe, the sun and the moon. The rising and setting of the sun, of the summer solstice and the equinoxes, and the lunar cycle. How many of you are familiar with the lunar cycle? Well, I know you are, Jeff. Again, any question that I ask, you're kind of exempt from. But these are incredibly, well, the solar cycle, still kind of complex, but it's not as complex as lunar cycle. These people were astronomers. They were watching the sky. They were in tuned with seasonal changes, with cyclical patterns and the way that the sun and the moon are, the earth moves and the moon moves around the sun. So kind of giving you an overview of the solar cycle. So this is kind of high level, but we have a tilt. It's about 23.4 degrees. And every day, the sun seems to rise at a different point in the sky. It almost moves in the way that a pendulum would. Makes a really cool figure 8 form. And if the earth is tilted more towards the sun, those result in those longer days. So summer days, and if the earth is tilted away, that results in shorter days. And the total pathway, that total movement, takes about 365 days a year. And it's pretty predictable, that pattern. The longest day of the year is the summer solstice. Happens about the same time every year, actually the same time every year, about June 20th. The equinoxes happen in the spring and the fall, same time every year. Shortest day of the year, the winter solstice, same time every year. It's pretty predictable. That's the solar cycle. These earthworks were built with that in mind. Almost like calendars, but also places where those alignments were celebrated, where the pathway of the sun and the moon and those cyclical changes were meaningful and people were gathering to celebrate them. So if you're looking to the left, your left, that's Hopeton. Again, Hopeton's part of Hopewell Culture National Historical Park in Chillicothe. Hopeton has two astronomical alignments, the winter solstice and the summer solstice. If you stand at one corner of the square on the winter solstice sunset and watch the sunset, it sets directly through a passageway on either side. See those gateways? Directly through. Now, on the winter solstice, if you stand at the entryway of those long parallel walls and watch the sunset, set straight directly through those walls. There's no accident about that. That was built, constructed into these earthwork complexes. This image over here, the right-hand image, is of Fort Ancient. Fort Ancient is a Hopewell ceremonial earthwork that kind of strays away from what we think of the norm of earthworks, especially Hopewell ceremonial earthworks. It's not a geometric enclosure, it is a hilltop enclosure, meaning those earthen walls straddle the natural ridge line above the Miami River Valley. Fort Ancient's got to be super cool and have summer solstice alignments. And you'll also see that they have lunar alignments too. I have like a friendly rivalry with my counterpart at Fort Ancient. We argue about whose site is cooler. We're both going to lose because they're both amazing sites. But yeah, they've got both alignments. But one thing to really grasp is that there's this square, imaginary square drawn in the north fort of Fort Ancient. That's what we're looking at right there. And those mounds, which mark each corner of the square, align with lunar alignments, or lunar and solar alignments. We're looking at the solar ones in particular. That one that kind of bears off this way, that's the summer solstice sunrise. So if you watch the sun rise at that point, you'll see it rise directly through a gap in the gateway there. So the winter solstice is the one that kind of goes off to the right-hand side. These mounds that mark each corner of the square were stone-capped. And many of those stones showed evidence of, well, all of the stones showed evidence of burning. So we have reason to believe that there were actually fires lit on top of each mound, likely related to those days when people were coming together to celebrate those solstice events, those solar alignments. This is an image of the winter solstice sunrise at Fort Ancient. See beautifully through those gateways. All right, so that's the solar cycle. Let's talk about the lunar cycle. So the moon positioned a little bit different than the Earth is positioned with the sun. It's about 5 degrees difference. Not that that matters. I mean, it does matter, but like, not that it's something that we can conceptualize. But that angle makes a big difference because the way that illumination happens. So if it's facing the sun, directly opposite of it rather, that's a full moon. If it's the same direction of the sun, that's a new moon. And the crescent moon is also near the sun as well. It's that waxing and waning cycle. I'm still trying to grasp the lunar cycle. If you can't tell, I'm a archaeologist, not an astronomer. But it's incredibly complex. Before I started this job, it was all about the waxing and the waning of the moon. I could recognize that. But did you know that the moon actually rises at different points throughout the year? Well, not even just over the course of 1 year, but over the course of 18.6 years? Well, it do. But that whole revolution, the waxing and the waning, takes about 29 and a half days. But here's where that 5-degree tilt comes in. It causes the moon to rise and set more northerly and southerly than the sun. So the moon at its northernmost and southernmost point actually is rising and setting farther out than the sun does at its solstices. And the northern and southernmost moonrise and moonsets happen only every 18.6 years. We call that its maximums, where it's the farthest out it's ever going to be. And then over the course of 9.3 years, that angle kind of narrows out to what we call its minimums, where the northernmost and southernmost points are the closest they're ever going to be. Then it takes another 9.3 years to go back out again. The total lunar cycle is 18.6 years. It just so happens that the octagon of the Newark Earthworks aligns perfectly with the northernmost moonrise. The passageway between the circle and square there, or octagon. There's also 7 other alignments as well, but my favorite and the most visually stimulating one, I think, is the northernmost, directly through that passageway. Timothy Black, again, wonderful earthwork photographer, captured this image of the avenue and the lunar alignment. So, fun thing about finding these astronomical alignments, we actually didn't know they existed until about 1980. Which isn't that really that long ago, right? So, back on the topic of other World Heritage sites, so there's this place called Stonehenge, right? Stonehenge has solar and lunar alignments. Ray Hively and Robert Horn, which were 2 professors from Earlham College. One was a philosopher, the other one was a physicist. They were reading this book about Stonehenge and they're like, well, astronomical alignments, they're nothing. If you draw enough lines just by pure coincidence, you're going to get an alignment. Just happens. It's statistics. So they couldn't make it to Stonehenge because it's kind of a ways away from Indiana, right? But they could make it to the octagon, the Newark Earthworks. So they came to Newark with the goal of disproving astronomical alignments. What they found is that there are indeed no solar alignments here at the octagon. None. So their theory didn't pan out at all. They're like, no solar alignments? Now that's statistically significant. Then they're like, okay, if it's not the sun, maybe it's some other solar or some other celestial body. Let's try the moon. Sure enough, that's what they found. They found the lunar alignment, that major one through the avenue connecting the circle and the octagon, and those 7 others, which gave Observatory Mound a whole new meaning. We called it Observatory Mound before. That point of the earthwork is about 6 feet higher than the surrounding wall. But now that's the place where you would want to observe that lunar alignment. All right, so you might be asking yourself, when's that next alignment? Well, my friends, it's right now, happening. The next alignment is actually October 21st of this month. It's at 9:41 p.m. There's other chances to view it as well. March 7th is actually the northernmost moonrise, because that alignment is visible over the course of like about a year and a half. With our eyeballs, you can't really see the subtle itty bitty differences, but the northernmost moonrise is March 7th. It's at 11:35 a.m. There's also a good time to see it again at night on October 11th, 2025. You're like, oh my gosh, October 21st? That's like 2 weeks away. Why haven't you been advertising this? Good question. So there's a couple of reasons. Number one is we still do not have full access to the Octagon yet. It still operates as a Mound Builders Country Club. I don't know if you noticed, did I put a picture in there? Well, I'll flip back at the end. You'll see that the Octagon actually functions as a golf course, Mound Builders Country Club. Their current lease would have gone until 2078, but there was a settlement reached between the Ohio History Connection, who owns the site, and Mound Builders Country Club to buy out that lease. And effective January 1st, 2025, that site will be open and accessible to the public every single day of the year. But not until January. So that's one of our barriers. We don't want to flood the place with people. Another, and I think the most important reason why we haven't fully advertised it is because we've got some really, really important guests coming on October 21st. Those are our tribal partners, the descendants of the indigenous people who built these earthworks. And many of them have never had the chance to witness these lunar alignments. So we want to give them the chance to do that without like a million people surrounding them. We want them to experience it so that we can offer a fuller visitor experience in 2025. And really, our tribal partners, this wouldn't be possible without them. World Heritage would not be possible without them. This is Chief Glenna Wallace. She is the first female chief of the Eastern Shawnee, and she is one of the most amazing women that I will ever meet. Inspirational, just so powerful. And this, I think, is one of my favorite quotes from her. She says, "These people have, for the most part, been overlooked, unrecognized, and underappreciated. And today we have the opportunity to change that, and that's our responsibility." So letting Indigenous people, offering space for them to be in these earthworks, to experience them, and to share their stories and their connection with these spaces is something that is so incredibly important. So that's why we haven't advertised the 21st. Their experience we're prioritizing amongst anyone else. These are the descendant communities. Many of them don't get the chance to visit Ohio very often. As of right now, there are no American Indian tribes with seats of government here in Ohio. There haven't been since 1843. Many of our indigenous tribes that called this land home were forcibly removed in the mid-1800s. And before that as well, with many broken treaties. Every American Indian tribe has their own Trail of Tears, even those from this area as well. This is our delegation that went to Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, when World Heritage inscription happened. And we've got 5 American Indian tribes represented on that delegation. Chief Glenna Wallace, next to her is Josh Garcia from the Wyandotte tribe. You go over, that young man there is Logan York. He's a citizen of the Nyamia. Next to him, you move to the left, is Alex Weesaw. He's a citizen of the Potawatomi tribe. Next to him is Joe Stallman, who is a citizen of the Seneca Cayuga. Well, he was the Tribal Historic Preservation Officer for the Seneca Cayuga, but he is a tribal citizen himself. The fact that they were able to be there on that day. And Chief Glenna was the one who gave the 2-minute address that we were allowed after World Heritage inscription occurred. Something very special and something that we want to continue moving forward, tribal involvement in World Heritage. So how much is the Ohio History Connection invested in what what the 8 minutes I have left. We're pretty invested. We've actually made World Heritage part of our strategic plan for the next 5 years. So in everything that we're doing, World Heritage is in the forefront. And our goals are to create a world-class visitor experience and promote economic development in the region. So it's not just meant to benefit the Ohio History Connection, but all Ohioans, and particularly local communities like you guys, Granville. So here's some of my goals. I want to maintain or increase the museum hours that we have currently at the Great Circle Museum. So currently, if you don't know, we're open Wednesday through Saturday, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. And then on Sunday from 12 p.m. to 4 p.m. I'm hoping one day we can be open 7 days a week. But if you look at that last little bit, hoping to increase my site staff to make this a reality. Currently, I have 3 other full-time employees. 2 of them are maintenance. 1 of them is interpretation and visitor experience. The other 2 are part-time. I've also got 2 wonderful volunteers, and I'm always looking for volunteers if any of you are interested. But that is my goal. I want the space to be open to the public for education opportunities. And as I mentioned, January 2025, we will have a new portion of the site that everyone can enjoy, and making that a welcoming place where people can come and enjoy themselves, both recreationally, to walk around the site, but also to learn. Speaking of learning, I want to increase events and programming. I want events that appeal to all ages. Most of what we do caters towards, we get a lot of retirees. People have the time to travel and spend time. And 4th graders. See a lot of 4th graders. That's because that's Ohio History Connection, or Ohio History's the 4th grade curriculum standard for social studies. Makes a lot of sense. But I want to go beyond that. I am looking forward to building more relationships with the universities that we have right here in Licking County. We've got OSU Newark. We've got Denison. OSU main campus isn't that far away either. So really building these opportunities to partner and learn and grow. Some of the events that we have coming up, that I am hereby decreeing that we are doing as site manager of the Newark Earthworks, we will have a Licking County History Day, because really it's the citizens of Licking County that made the preservation of the Newark Earthworks possible. I want to celebrate that. If I got my dates correct, I need to double check myself. March 1st, 1808 was when Licking County was incorporated. So I'm hereby declaring that at the Newark Earthworks Licking County Day. So come and celebrate us. No way. There we go. So you should all be there from Granville. You got to celebrate. Licking County happened right here. We're also having that northernmost moon celebration as well. And the other barrier that I see a lot when it comes to earthwork tours is physical accessibility. We do a lot of walking. Sites are big. So one of the things that I would like to incorporate more of is accessibility, whether that be through digital means, or we'll figure something out, but a way to fully experience the site without having to physically walk it. And then, like I said, we see a lot of 4th graders already, but I see more 4th graders going to Flint Ridge. Love Flint Ridge. Flint Ridge is amazing. But I want to see just as many at the Newark Earthworks as well. In terms of economic impact, we have seen a definite increase in vegetation since inscription. So we're looking at you look from July 2023 to June 2024, we're seeing a huge difference between one year to the next. Year to date, we have about 1,000 more people than we did last year. And there's only more coming. We're open year round, and one of my biggest goals is not to just draw people to the earthworks, but to other sites and attractions around the area. Lincoln County has a lot to offer. I love living here. There's always something to do, whether that be going downtown or downtown here in Granville to get coffee at River Road, eating at Three Tigers like I did tonight. We've got some amazing restaurants and breweries here. Black Hand Gorge for hiking. It's absolutely wonderful to be here. There's so much to do. So we want people to experience that and hopefully spend the night, because tourism is actually a huge business. I'm learning a lot from Dan Motor, who is the executive director of Explore Lincoln County. Tourism, man, like, it brings in the big bucks. And that's what I'm hoping World Heritage can do for us here in Lincoln County, and not just here, but all over the state of Ohio. We have the opportunity to really capitalize on this and build our presence. So that when kids like me in high school say, oh, I want to get out of this state, I won't say that anymore, because we've got so much to do here, so much to be proud of. So I want this to continue in the tradition of gathering, of celebrating, of being part of something bigger, because that's truly what these earthwork sites are all about: coming together, places of gathering. And I want to thank you for being a part of that tonight, gathering here and learning. Yeah, look at me, 7:59. I'm getting these presentations down.
Thank you, sir. Can you take a couple questions?
Yeah, absolutely. Hopefully my kids are in bed by the time I get home. So yeah, ask me all the questions.
Speak loudly.
I'm assuming you're going to have some kind of blowout celebration on January the 1st, 2025 as well.
Yes. Oh, yes. I neglected to put that in my presentation. Yes. January 1st, 2025, we are planning on being open, offering tours of that site. It'll look, if you've ever been to one of our open houses, it'll look very similar to that, where we'll be offering regular periodic tours of the Aqueduct. If I can order things in time, we'll have a bookstore available for souvenirs. We'll have a party. You know what? I'm gonna get a cake. We're gonna have a cake. Yeah. So yeah, January 21st. I'm calling it a new year, new beginnings at the Newark Earthworks. There we go. Yes, we will. Very good question. So what physical changes do we see occurring at the Octagon? So yeah, it is ultimately not going to look like a golf course anymore. But that is going to be a process. It's not going to be an overnight change. There's a lot of work that needs to be done even before physical changes start happening. We need to figure out like where the underground utilities are, which will entail geophysical survey. We need to figure out which pathways we're keeping and which pathways we're not. I can guarantee you we're probably going to get rid of the pathways that go over the earthwork. In terms of the building, that's going to also be a renovation effort as well, but ultimately that will serve as a space for education and learning. My goal is to make that the visitor center for the Newark Earthworks. Gallery spaces, exhibits rather, things like that. But it's going to be a minute, to say the least. And a lot of it also, the ability to change these things in a timely manner requires a lot of funding too. So if any of you have got some big bucks laying around, I know where you can put it. But yeah, so to ultimately see that space being very similar to the Great Circle, where it's a grassy open space. Ultimately, I would love to see more native grasses, some prairie restoration in the areas surrounding the earthwork itself, but there's a lot of work to be done before that happens. Yes.
Along the same lines, like, I'm wondering, is there gonna be a main gate, ticket booth?
Oh.
You know, how do you
Yeah.
do you crowd control or visitor?
Yeah, so visitor control at the Octagon. Ultimately, like, again, I see it being very similar to the Great Circle, where the grounds themselves are open and accessible from dawn till dusk, where people have the ability to come and go as they please. The building will have regular accessible hours, probably very similar to what the Great Circle has today, so Wednesday through Saturday, 10 to 4 on Sunday. If I get more staff, we'll expand that. But as of right now, I don't see any limitations on access. We're even discussing the possibility of having guided tours sponsored at the Octagon for a certain amount of time, so that people can experience it without the looking for a monetary barrier. But still in the planning process, even though it's a couple of months away, we're still in conversation. So, yes.
Related to that, what are you gonna do with the trees?
So what are we gonna do with the trees at the Octagon? Ultimately,
Or both.
oh, at the Great Circle too.
Oh, yeah.
All right, so we actually have a vegetation management plan at the Ohio History Connection related to earthworks. So our vegetation management plan is this. If we see a tree that's sick, not doing so well, it poses a danger to our visitors or to the preservation of the earthwork itself. Like say that tree is on the earthwork wall, got quite a few of them at the Great Circle. We see that not doing so good, we will take care of that. We don't want anybody to get hurt or the earthwork. But if the tree is fine, it's doing its thing, it's healthy, we're gonna leave it until it's time for it to come down. So ultimately, one day, someday, probably not in any of our lifetimes, or even my little kids' lifetimes, those spaces will be open. There won't be any trees. I will say that there may be a couple of trees that we do remove at the Octagon. And that will be to fully visualize the lunar alignment. There's quite a few big guys in there straight through that avenue. So those would be the only trees that we would intentionally consider healthy or not. But the rest of them, as long as they're doing good, keep them. Yeah, I love trees. Trees are my favorite. And those of us who give tours of the earthworks, we love a good tree in the middle of July. Yes. Not that we know of. There is no evidence of connection between European peoples and peoples of what is today North America. People being people, we have this amazing ability as humans to come to realizations just on our own. We as people love patterns. Even from a young age, we love patterns, we see patterns. That's something that we all share as just being people. And even though things might look similar from culture to culture and region to region, doesn't necessarily mean that people have contact. If you ask my uncle, he is the first one who came up with the Kentucky Fried Chicken bowl. He figured that out. He did that first before they even started marketing. So he didn't find it, but I'm sure he was doing that before they did it. But you know, like independent realizations. My uncle does not work for Kentucky Fried Chicken. The different realizations just because of what we've got going on in our brain that we're hardwired as people. Yeah, Jeff?
Are there any open houses between now and January 1st?
There are. Oh yeah. So yes, October 20th and 21st are our Newark Earthworks open houses. October 19th, Jeff will also be leading a Newark Earthworks remnants tour. So, did you know that even though much of the earthwork is destroyed, there's our little bits and pieces here and there around the city of Newark. And if you join Jeff from 9 to noon,
3.5 miles, 3 hours, bring a hat and a water bottle.
he'll point them out to you. Yep. So that's on October 19th from 9 to noon. October 20th from noon to 4, we'll be doing tours. We'll be doing activities. Come out and see us at the Octagon and the Great Circle. And then October 21st from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m., we'll be doing it all too. Tours, activities, all that kind of stuff. Yes.
And while we're not open to the public for one of the northernmost moonrises, the counterpart to that, the southernmost moonrise, happened earlier today. And when you go out after this, the moon will be at the very lowest you will ever see it in the sky, and it's setting at its southernmost point at about 11:30 tonight. So you can see the moon in that extreme when you go out and you go, boy, the moon is really low on the southern horizon. That is as low as it will ever get in 18.6 years. So look south as you go out.
Yeah, so southern.
Right there.
Maximum southern sunset?
Nope.
Oh, moonrise.
Under your head,
Moonrise.
under your head. Maximum southern moonrise just happened this afternoon. And then maximum southern moonset all the way to the left.
There we go. There we go.
But it's just low in the
So
sky.
if you're not doing it at 11:30, I didn't tell you, Jeff did. I didn't send you out there. Okay.
One more question.
Sure. Yeah.
Just curious, like the gatherings, do you know if they only did it during like alignments or you can run it
We really don't. I mean, like once every 18.6 years, that seems like a lot of work just to be doing that every day. So they were probably gathering more frequently than 18.6 years. But places like Hopeton, they were probably doing it every year, winter and summer. Other sites like Town City, which is a mortuary center, they were doing that periodically when their ancestors were from this world on to the next. So we think there's at least sometimes a year where they were definitely gathering at those events. The lunar ones, good question. Yeah. Also, there's a question that I've had, like, it's interesting to think about it and to entertain it. So, like, we have this geometry, we have this standard across our site. And one of the visitors asked me, he's like, do you think they were like playing games here? Because the parallel that he drew was today we have standardized large gathering places where we all come together to celebrate sporting events, as the NFL football field. Same shape. Every major league baseball field, same size, same shape. Soccer pitches. It's about I don't have an answer for you, but it was interesting to kind of entertain that thought. We do have parallels today. I don't know.
Okay, another round of applause. Thank you, Sarah.